See, symbols are important, and I'm talking to somebody that uses symbols as part of his craft. Now, I don't think Michael needs much introduction to my Australian colleagues, and probably doesn't need much introduction to my New Zealand colleagues as well, but with due deference, I'll just give you a little bit. Michael is a cartoonist, a philosopher, a poet, and an artist, and he's worked for 35 years or more, and I'm going to read from a little bio. Has often explored the idea of an innocent and sacred personal world. He describes his approach as regressive, messy, and vaudevillian, producing work which is both raw and sublime, loved and hated. His themes and images have been widely used and adapted in the realms of music, theatre, therapy, God, we need that, religious life and spirituality. And then, again, from Michael's writing, there's a little confession, and I'm going to draw from the back end of that confession. It's worth reading if you want to just have a little bit of fun. And I'm going to read this in reverse order, and you'll get the reason why. And Michael writes, "I've developed a deep affection for my abiding characters and symbols. They nourish me greatly. Many times since the duck and teapot revelation, their strange antics and adventures have anticipated the course my life would take." I love that. "And yet my moon always hung faithfully in the sky, constant companion, luminous and remote, gentle symbol of mystery, femininity and nocturnal wisdom." So that gives you some idea of Michael Leunig. He is one of our living treasures, and he's an old friend who makes himself available to talk to us from time to time. What precipitated this conversation was on Australia Day this year, Michael did some work that appeared on the front of the Melbourne Age, and there was this beautiful piece of artwork in an Aboriginal style, if you like, and I'll get Michael to explain that. And associated with that was this piece of prose, and again, I'll get Michael to explain that to you. He'll do better than I could possibly do. And that'll be the start of this conversation. And in a way, you almost got to accept you're in a parallel universe for a moment. This is not the real world. This is a world of letting your thoughts wander a bit, because we're actually going to talk about the soul. So Michael, over to you, my dear friend.
Oh, thank you, Alan. Am I being heard out there? I am, yes. Feels unnatural. No, if I can hear myself now. Thank you, Alan. Well, I'll get to the painting. The painting, which I don't think is up there, but I was asked to, Australia Day was approaching, I think it was 2 days away, and I was asked to suddenly provide a full-page painting, front page of the Age, and write 200 words. And, well, that's journalism for you. And so I made a painting. My thoughts went back to an event that happened in North Queensland. I'll get to that. But first, that groan I always get as Australia Day approaches, and this idea of what our patriotism should be. I have trouble with it ever since I'm a child. I've seen it kind of become more and more jingoistic, nationalistic, and something I'm uncomfortable with, and I feel a lot of Australians are uncomfortable with. I think this land is too large and diverse and extraordinary to be sort of summed up in these kind of catchphrases about our identity that have just, they're worn out and they don't suit us. And there's something lovely, I think, in this culture that they don't take it entirely seriously. It doesn't sort of, it can't get off the ground in some way. But I think the greatest, for me personally, and what I've observed with people, is the deepest affection people have had for this land that I've seen is something to do with the natural continent, the bush, the birds, When I was at school as a boy, there seemed to be much more knowledge about the birds, the trees, the landforms. The jingoistic nationalism hadn't quite flourished back then, and I prefer the old version myself. So I think this affection for the land lies at the heart of what we're talking about. We can discuss it scientifically, as we must, and with expertise. And I must confess, I'm not here as an expert. I'm here as a human voice and who takes it seriously. But I feel there must be this affection underlying it, which is an emotional tone, which is a thing of the spirit. I mean, ultimately, we sense it best through our affection and our spirit for the land, whether we love it, whether we love that bird or that tree or that hill or whatever. And these are very innocent ways of beholding the land and the country. They're innocent, and they sometimes don't fit to the political discussion or the scientific discussion. And there's a whole language to do with that. And I think we have to, as much as we have to reclaim and restore and look after the environment, I think we have to reclaim some of this language if we're to do that. If we're to do that task, we have to not be embarrassed by this language. Allan, I'm going on a bit long, Allan.
No, keep going,
but
keep going.
This word soul, which we become so phobic about in contemporary society, it was the language of our grandparents and our great-grandparents. And when they said it, what did they mean? And when I hear Indigenous people talk of spirit of country, what are they referring to? It's about something real. So this all fascinates me. So I will mention, Allan, what this piece was about, and I don't know whether you want me to read it, but
I do actually, Michael. I think that has most impact if you do. It's a beautiful piece of writing.
Well, it's it was written very rapidly and in a state of exhaustion, but as Australia Day approached. When it goes with this painting, right? Australian identity, who knows? Who cares? And does it matter that such a complex and elusive concept about nationhood be enshrined in words? Attempts to do so are often lopsided and frequently received with a shrug or a wry groan. Pronouncements about the national psyche, the bitter and the sweet, are foisted upon the citizens from above and bandied about for all sorts of purposes. But deep in their hearts, people understand that there is no such thing as an average Australian. Thanks be. Yet there is a nation of individuals who occupy a common ground, of which they are custodians, whether they realise it or not. Arrayed with a huge variety of creatures, plants and landforms, in spite of its use and misuse at the hands of settlers and occupiers, it is a unique national estate of great beauty, spirit and strength. While Australians may have uncertainties about the authenticity of their man-made culture, there can be no doubt that the land beneath their feet that stretches into the unknown beyond their horizons is utterly real and natural. It has identity and integrity. It has soul. Yet all too easily, a nation that is predominantly urban in character may lose sight of its natural setting and spirit of country and be all the poorer, sadder and less vital for such loss of connection. It may suffer from some deadening loss of imagination, joyous humility and visionary innocence. A nation may turn its back on its greatest source of wisdom and underestimate how much it needs the natural world. A white tourist from the south was heard to ask an old Indigenous man in northern Queensland how best she might get to understand and connect to the country in the way that he did. Came the brief reply with a big smile, just go out in the country and sleep at night on the ground there. Sleep on country. So that was it, and those words I heard spoken by this old fella, and it's as if he was saying, look, just start, just go and sleep there, just one night.
And Michael, the painting the painting that I wish I had a copy of, but don't, but perhaps you've seen it?
Well, it simply was a painting. I've much admired the glorious painting that has been happening in Indigenous communities. I think it's one of the great, vital, strong, spirited sort of movements of art that's ever happened in this country. And so much of it is about, or it comes with the title Nura. Nura appears, as I understand it, is the word from at least the Western Desert in the centre, and in many areas a version of that word Nura, meaning our country, my place, my sacred country, my homeland, Nura. And that to me embodies what Australia Day could be about in some way. And so this old fella said, just go and sleep there. Just start there. And I guess what he's saying, Alan, is, you know, you have to lie down with it. You have to feel it. And there's so many people have never done that simple thing. And I guess I'm paying respect there to our senses, to this affection and to this bond, which is physical ultimately. And it's very sensuous in its origins. And the problem, you know, this beautiful thing of science, and then there's the politics, it's sometimes dried out. And I think to try and put people back and their feelings and emotions into the situation is what has to be done also, and allow them to have it somehow, and find ways to foster that.
So Michael, just for a moment, the search for identity, you know, this notion that somehow there is something about being Australian, that myth, that as you said, that concern. What's that about? Is it a misplaced effort? Are we in the wrong place?
Well, sometimes I feel I'm in the wrong planet, but I think we all are feeling a bit always alienated. It's a human condition, somewhat. But any country, whether it be Australia, whether it's New Zealand, wherever, Carl Jung, the great psychologist, did talk about this unique spirit in every landmass that does affect the people who live in it. It's immeasurable, it's unknowable in conventional terms, that there is something about a place, and which we may be becoming sort of immune to or unaffected by. We pass over it, we look at it as scenery.
Is that a form of illness?
Well, it's a deficiency of aliveness, of being, I would say, to just see landscape as, well, you can see it as real estate or scenery or whatever you like, but to have, I keep returning to this affection and commitment to and care for and understanding that it cares for us. It's strange, the word park. I was thinking as I came here, I saw this word car park, and I thought, why do they call car parks parks? There's something odd that this is the most common park. I mean, that's a little flippant remark, but that's what a cartoonist's mind does. And you see things. So identity is so cerebral now. It's so brain-ridden. It's up here. It's things that can be said in words and spouted. But there's the silent world, the non-material world where identity lives in the bosom, so to speak, and identity, not the identity that can be paraded around, and not the identity that can be attached to a flag or a national anthem. I think it's quite amusing that our flag doesn't quite work. No one's really satisfied with it. And I say that with full respect to all those people who, I don't know, have suffered under it or fought for it or whatever. I don't know. But somehow I don't think it works, nor does our national anthem. There's no way that national anthem works. And that's just me being very vulgar and frank in my old age. But I sort of rather like the way Australians seem to shrug about the whole thing, and they're never going to get too head up about these things. But I would like to think they hold this affection for country in their locale even, because it's so diverse. It's so diverse, Alan, but you can become connected to just a few trees on the corner of the street, and they mean the world to you, and they welcome you home, and you say, I'm glad those trees are there. And humans are like that. Humans are like that. But is this in the political language, these kind of considerations? I mean, what do we do it all for? What is this economy for? What is this political system for? What does it serve? Does it serve this thing where people go to bed at night and lie their heads on the pillow, and that's where the truth of what they live for comes out? Their hopes, their fears, their affections are not included in so much of the political talk or the cultural talk or in the art world. There's a private world of the people, and I think this connects to land and people in their gardens and people in their parks. So I think it just needs more blessing, and it's got to be blessed and given okay, and the language of it. And
I just had a thought, Michael. I wonder whether, if you look at this group of people, they're probably largely scientific in their orientation, and I wonder whether we don't employ enough poets and artists in our business that we live in one part of where we should be living in a way. Whether because the connection with people, the connection with soul, is probably what matters, and perhaps we don't pay enough attention to that. I wonder.
Well, perhaps so. I mean, there seems to be this growing, the separation between the self and the head. Here's the intellect, and we live in our heads, and there is this world of the internet and all these words, and it's so cerebral, and the body has become more and more passive, and it seems to represent the split between humanity and nature, like the split between the mind and the body. And I like to think that just as there are ecosystems, that we are an ecosystem ourselves. There is this thing called human nature. It's not that nature out there. We are nature also. And it's important that we are in balance, just as any ecosystem is. And there would seem to be, I don't want to make rash pronouncements, because I am no expert, as I say, but there would seem to be something lopsided going on. There are mysterious conditions developing in the culture. There is this sort of anxiety neurosis, the anger, the depression statistics, all these things, and parents live in constant concern for that sort of soulful well-being of their children, or mental well-being. It's as if contemporary urbanized life, removed from nature, is very harmful to people and out of balance. And we put things into ourselves that damage us. We are an ecosystem which seems to be strong and can do anything with its technology and seem to be omnipotent and powerful, but we are more fragile than we know. It's just as the way we dumped so much chemical waste into rivers back then in the 50s, and we probably still do now. And, Rachel Carson wrote that lovely book, The Silent Spring, and they suddenly dawned on people, oh my God, we've been poisoning it, and it can't take it. It doesn't get washed out to sea. It kills the system. And I think we are presently watching a kind of parallel, a kind of destruction within the human sensibility, perhaps. And I don't want to sound too bleak, because as I say, we're intelligent, we're brilliant and dazzling and powerful, we can do all that, but there is something else there is an ecosystem being neglected, and it's going to kick back on us, and it is kicking back on us, I believe. So this is a sense of, there's the material world and this other world, which our ancestors called the spirit world. And it was all there in the sacred text, that it's not just of this world, there is something else to think about.
So Michael, just for a moment, kids,
Yeah.
and their experiences and what it is that creates the conditions that allows you to think about these things in different ways. And just wouldn't mind some reflection on that, you know.
Well, you see, sometimes you can look at children as the poor little canaries in the coal mine, in a sense. They often symptomise very quickly. They're open, they symptomise, they react, they fall apart quite readily. And they're strong and they're wily, but they also reflect. You see kids in nature, they start to know what to do. They seem to love it. Pretty soon there might be a caution. Urbanised kids go into the bush, there's a little fear for a start. Well, not too long, and soon they're digging around and finding things. And there is this thing, this sort of beauty. That's the other thing we miss out on. And there's this other word, beauty. You know, as I've said before, if Sigmund Freud looked at the consequences of sexual repression back in the 1800s or the early 1900s, if he looked at the hysteria that resulted from sexual repression, he might now look at our contemporary society and say, what is this repression of beauty going on? Why does it seem some luxury or some airy-fairy thing? And what happens if you don't allow this natural beauty, the need to be exposed to these beautiful forms and astonishing laws of nature? What does exposure to that do to us? Maybe something very good. And I watch in Melbourne, as I watch these blocks of apartments, which they now call vertical villages. They're not really high-rise, they're vertical villages, we are told. And people crowding in this intense urban situation, and people have got nowhere much to go, and kids can't catch a yabby anywhere and probably don't want to. They've probably got a game on their computer called Yabby Catch or something. And that bothers me deeply, because I think nature teaches us much and it humbles us much. And if ever humanity needed humbling in a healthy way, it's at present.
Michael, your cartoons feature simple animals, the goat, the duck.
Yeah.
Inanimate forms, the teapot.
Yeah.
Are they just friends, or are they more than that? Are they?
Well, I use animals, I suppose. You see an artist or a cartoonist, I just sort of sometimes put them into the picture because I like them, firstly, not because they are greatly symbolic. It's only later when I see the symbolism. And when I think about it, I think there are more things on this earth than humans. There are other sensibilities, there are other lives, and we all know that, and they matter, and they remind us of things. And the duck, to me, for instance, I used to rather like ducks. I still do, of course. There's something very playful, and I can never think of a harmful, rampaging duck. It's always some rather divine, innocent creature. Even its bill is rounded. It's not meant for inflicting wounds. It's something... and an Indian friend once told me, he said, how did you know about the duck? And in yoga, that it was the origin of yoga was kind of to try and, one of the things was to try and empathise so much with the duck that you take on the form of the duck and you assume the position of the duck. I said, I didn't know that. But so, you know, you put them in to sort of naturalise the human, this sort of endless human drama. We're so self-possessed, aren't we? And you just put animals in there because you need it. Drawing politicians all the time is a terrible thing, because the poor politicians, you know, they don't deserve to be lampooned the way they are. But you just think you just want to put a duck running amongst them to sort of lighten it up or naturalise it. And look, it's very infantile. Cartooning has a very infantile thing, but I think there's a certain You have a vision when you're becoming infantile. You see some truths you wouldn't normally see.
And the moon?
The moon, well, who doesn't love the moon? It's just to put it there because it's not us, it's beyond our understanding. Well, it used to be beyond our understanding.
It still is, isn't it?
Well, I'd like to think so. But see, you know, these are these affection things. These are rather sentimental things. And these are what it's all about, is it not? Imagine if the moon wasn't there. Sorry if I'm talking absurdly, but I think one has to get to that absurdity to see it differently, as long as it's well intended, the absurdity. So much of contemporary humour is hurtful. But the moon, yeah, natural, mystical, and I like the fact that nature has a mystical quality, and we can enjoy it. It's so enjoyable. It's so lovely to enter into, allow. I remember sleeping on country up in the centre, northwest of Alice Springs, way out, on the Finke River, the oldest river, constant riverbed in the world, I'm told, sleeping there. And I woke at about, I don't know, 2, 3 a.m., and I woke, and I looked up, and I'm out in the open, and there's these stars like you've never seen before, of course, in the centre. And at the moment I woke up, I was aware of a meteor that seemed to start in that horizon, as if it came there, and it was the biggest, brightest, most spectacular meteor I've ever seen, and it came hurtling across. It seemed in slow motion, and it went across, and I followed it, and it disappeared, and I was bedazzled. And I went instantly back to sleep. It was remarkable. It's as if I'd woken for it, you see. So the next morning I awoke and I got up and we're out in the middle of nowhere. And I went for a walk in the desert. And I think it's the one time in my life, I've never had such a feeling of well-being and that all was well in the world. So it was the most beautiful, memorable experience. And probably of no consequence to this conference at all, but it was a mystical experience which was beautiful to enjoy and to remember for the rest of my life. And in there, nature provides it. And I mean, all the films in the world, I don't watch films anyway very much, but they could never give you that. And so there's so much it gives. Nature is so generous.
So Michael, as you were telling that story, and you used the word mystical, I was actually thinking of mystery.
Yes.
And how much of the world is mysterious in that way and not to be explained, I guess.
Well, it is, and of course, we sometimes think of mystery as mumbo jumbo. It's where hocus pocus starts, and it's a superstition, and bad things happen. But there's another way in which it's totally enjoyable and sensuous, and I think it's related to this beautiful word called, which is, or this term, negative capability, the ability to not know and to be comfortable with not knowing. And any scientist worth their salt would certainly know of that and love to live in the not knowing and wonder and wander in that. And so that's what I mean by mystical, and I think every scientist probably would understand the mystery of something. You know, I mean, I spent so much of my time looking down a microscope as a kid, my favourite toy, peering at things, just peering in wonder. I didn't understand any of it, but I was wondering. And now I'm seeing all these natural forms and the proportions and the little, you know, the shapes, and you're getting this beauty in this of the minute. So always beauty, and I really think children don't get much beauty on television, and they don't get it on a computer. Nothing like what nature would give them. But they need to be slowed down and brought to it and allowed it, and they need to sleep on country.
Michael, thank you very much. I'm actually not going to go to questions because I don't think we can do justice to it this evening, and that's probably a good point to finish. So Michael, before I do, I mean, it's an interesting one. Yeah. So Michael, just before we do close, do you want to just describe your beautiful painting?
Oh, it's a rapidly painted thing. What is it? Well, there's a little fella sleeping in, or a woman, whatever, I don't know. A person is sleeping in the middle, in the midst of these things. And I rather like the big shark thing that's in the Australian dreaming, that sort of thing that's more terrifying than any of us and keeps us in line a little bit, you know. And then, I don't know, I've been so inspired by the Indigenous painters, and that's really a naive style, but a lot of Australian painters are very cautious about being seen to copy the Indigenous painting and say, no, it's theirs, leave it alone. And I have painted many times with Indigenous painters and been with them, and I said, look, do you mind, what would you think if I did those dots? Oh, good, have some dots, you know, do it, just do it, and it's okay. And I'm always bewildered by why so many Australian painters just tippy-toe around it and shy away from it. And it has been, well, I'm not saying that's a wonderful painting, that's a quick thing done for a newspaper, but it's so enjoyable to paint like that and to watch those people, and particularly those old people who it just can pour out of them, and it's very inspiring. And it comes from the land, and it is Nura.
Thanks very much, Michael. Look, just to conclude, the value for me is, in a way, the bookend of the Indigenous welcomes this morning, both from our local people in the Maori, and the same sentiments expressed by those people that Michael has expressed at the end of the day. I think it's a lovely way to bookend today's session. Now, Carmen, it's over to you to close and do the business, and thanks, Michael. For those that want to catch, Michael's here tonight for Stirring the Possum, 6 o'clock down at the terrace. It's only 5 or 10 minutes walk down there. We've got an expanded session with an elder from the Nurrungeri tribe and a children's writer, Roseanne Hawke, and we're doing a similar sort of session, but it'll have a slightly different emphasis and a little bit different content. So if you're welcome to come to that as well.